There are memories that don't fade, not because we hold on to them, but because they hold on to us. My name is Miriam Lenora Wade. I'm 74 years old and I live alone in a small wooden house tucked in the hills of North Carolina. Every afternoon, I sit in my old rocking chair on the porch, listening to the birds, breathing in the damp scent of old wood, and whispering to the shadows that only I still see. The neighbors call me Cookie Grandma Miriam, the woman who never misses Sunday church service. But few know that Sundays used to be the darkest part of my week, not because of sermons or rituals, but because of something I buried deep inside. Over 60 years ago, I used to be a girl who loved to write. I had a little notebook my mama gave me, where I'd jot down thoughts like wildflowers. But after 1960, the pages turned blank. I stopped writing. I stopped speaking. I learned to survive by being silent. I don't share this story to ask for pity. I share it for someone out there, someone who, like me, once carried a weight they thought no one could see. You're not alone. Back then, I thought I understood sadness, but real sadness is when you walk into your house and can't lift your eyes. The wooden house I grew up in sat low in a foggy valley, tucked between red maples that lit up every fall. From the outside, it looked like any other home in the country, smoke rising each morning, laundry fluttering on the line, and Mama's voice calling from the back porch in the afternoons. But inside, it was a different world, a world where everything was held together by silence. My mother, thin, always furrowing her brow for no reason, was the only one I saw wake before dawn and sleep last. She cooked, cleaned, raised everything except herself. I never once saw her truly laugh. Not because she didn't know how, because she had no reason to. My father was the younger brother of my grandfather, something that made folks in the village uncomfortable, so they never talked about it. Grandpa came to live with us after Grandma passed. Nobody asked why. In our town, people believed, if you're meant to know, you'll know. Otherwise, let it be. I was an only child. Now that I think of it, that might have been a blessing. Every Sunday morning, I'd wake up earlier than usual, not for church, but to clean Grandpa's room. Why? Because he didn't like anyone touching his things but me. I was 9. He used to say, "You're better at this than your mama ever was." Every time he said that, Mama would quietly wash a dish that was already clean. I didn't know why I shivered when Grandpa called my name. Even in summer. Didn't know why my hands trembled when I was left alone with him. I didn't know, or maybe I didn't dare to, because at that age, you don't understand fear. You only know that it's there like a cold draft through the cracks, like darkness sitting in the corner that never goes away. That Sunday, Mama had a fever, high enough that she couldn't sit up in bed. Daddy took her to the clinic down in the valley and asked me to watch Grandpa and make lunch. I remember nodding. I remember Grandpa smiling. And I remember the scent of pine wood in the air as he closed the door behind us. When you're a child, you don't know what's right or wrong. You only know what makes your heart race and your hands go cold. That afternoon, sunlight streamed in through thin cloud, falling onto the wooden floor in long, slanting stripes like quiet cuts across time. I sat at the kitchen table, peeling apples, preparing the pie. Grandpa liked apple cinnamon, baked just golden on top. He entered the kitchen without a sound. Always that way, as if even his footsteps were afraid. "What are you up to?" "Miriam," he asked. But his eyes weren't on my hands. His eyes felt like cold fingers grazing my neck. "I'm practicing baking, like Mama taught me," I replied, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. He walked closer. I could hear the leather of his boots creak. I could even hear my own breath short, choppy, as if I were already out of air. "You're better at it than your mama," he said. And I didn't know why. But my apple slipped from my hand and rolled slowly across the floor, stopping by his foot. I watched it like it was the last hope I had left in that moment. Small, round, fragile, something he could crush with a single step. I wished someone would call me. "Daddy, Mama, anyone?" But no one called. Only the wind came through the door frame, making the lace curtain shiver, and me with small hands. a knotted stomach, and a stillness crawling up my leg. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Heavy, like a stone on a sapling just beginning to grow. "Come up to my room for a bit," he said. "There's something I want to show you." I have to bake the pie," I whispered. He didn't answer, just pressed his hand down a little firmer, and I stood up, not because I wanted to, but because I had already learned the most important rule to survive at that age: don't make grown-ups angry. As I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic room, each wooden step groaned beneath me like they were trying to warn me. But no one hears the groan of old wood, just like no one heard the cry I kept inside me that day. "Please, someone, see me!" Pain doesn't begin with a scream. It begins with silence long enough that you forget the sound of your own voice. Grandpa's room was in the attic. It had a small window facing the maple woods and a round wooden table where he liked to read the paper. He said it was quiet there, no one bothered him. I understood. It was also the place where no one could hear anything. That door made a particular sound when it shut, click. Dry and sharp, like the world behind it had been sliced off from everything else. Every time that door closed, I knew there would be no escape for the next few hours. And no one would ask, "Where's Miriam?" He led me to the wooden cabinet. "Grab that photo album. I want to show you pictures of your grandma when she was young." I obeyed, though my hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the album. The first photo was of a young woman in a white floral dress, standing by an apple tree. Her face was gentle but sad. "Your hair's like hers," he murmured. "But your eyes, they're brighter." I didn't know what to say. Compliments from him always came laced with something unnamed, something that made me want to run, but kept my feet still. Then he sat on the bed and patted the empty space beside him. "Come, sit with me for a bit." I looked toward the window. The wind had picked up, spinning red leaves into little whirlwind. I wished I was one of those leaves free to fall, to fly, to disappear from that room, but I wasn't a leaf. I was a 9-year-old girl, obedient, scared, and with no one to call. I sat down, my back straight, my eyes fixed on the frayed carpet beneath my feet. His hand touched my hair, at first, gently like he used to pet his old hound years ago. Then, slowly, it changed, became cold, heavy, sickening. I don't remember everything after that. My memory is like a ribbon dipped in black ink, faint flashes of light in thick darkness. But I remember one thing: I didn't cry. Not because I was brave, but because I knew if I cried, he would say I was weak, and Mama hated weak girls. When I left his room hours later, night had fallen. No one asked where I'd been. No one saw the bruises hidden beneath my sleeves. I walked straight to the porch, to the rocking chair still warm with the last breath of sunlight. I sat there, and for the first time, I locked a door inside myself. Locked it tight, so no one would see, so no one could come in, so no one could hurt me again. Not everyone has a place to hide. I did an old rocking chair on the porch, the only spot where I could stay silent and still be heard. From that Sunday on, every time another one approached, my stomach would twist like a rope pulled too tight. No one spoke about what happened. No one looked at me differently. But that very silence was what terrified me most, because silence was its own kind of permission. Grandpa still called me up to his room. Same time, same tone, same door, closing behind me. And still I didn't cry. But something had changed. Afterwards, I wouldn't go to my room. Wouldn't eat dinner. Wouldn't read. I would sit on the old rocking chair on the porch, the one place his shadow had never touched. The only place where the air didn't feel too thick to breathe. The chair creaked in a slow, steady rhythm, like the sigh of an old soul who'd run out of things to say. I liked that sound. It didn't ask. It didn't judge. It didn't need me to explain. I started whispering to the chair. Not loud, just enough for me to hear. I told it everything I couldn't carry. That I missed Mama. That I missed her soft humming in the evenings. That I wished I could go back to being the Miriam from before the one who baked pies, wrote in a diary, and believed all grown-ups were kind. I told it about the nights I couldn't sleep, about the smell of his cigarettes, about the feel of his rough hands that made my skin ache long after he left. And the chair, it listened. Always. Every Monday morning, when Grandpa was out in the fields and I was home alone before school, I would return to that chair as if to recharge what little strength I had left. Eventually, I stopped whispering. I just sat there, staring out at the tree line, clutching the wooden arms tight. In my mind, I repeated one sentence over and over like a silent vow. If I can just endure long enough, this will pass. I didn't know why I believed that. Maybe because of a dream, or maybe because of something Mama once said. When I came home crying from being bullied, everything has its season. Baby, even winter has to let go. I didn't realize I was growing up, but I knew I was changing. No longer the little Miriam who hid behind Mama's skirt. No, I was a Miriam who knew how to survive. Even if the price was the childhood I'd never get back. Some people enter your life as quietly as morning sunlight through tree branches. No noise, no promises, but they change everything. I still remember the day she showed up. It was an early autumn morning, the kind where the air carried the smell of fallen leaves and just enough chill to make you pull your sweater a little tighter. Daddy had gone to town early. Mama was no longer with us. Just me and Grandpa in that house. Like every Sunday, I was sweeping the yard when I heard the unfamiliar sound of a car pulling up. Strange. In a place so far off the map, no one ever came unannounced. A silver Ford stopped by our gate. The door opened, and a woman stepped out tall, straight-backed, wearing a long floral dress and white gloves. Her hair was neatly pinned up, her shoes spotless, and her eyes carried a whole world I had never seen. She was Aunt June, Mama's cousin from Charlotte. She brought a basket of pastries and stories that sounded like fairy tales. She said she came just to visit for a few days, clear her head. At the time, I just stared at her. Not because of her dress or the basket, but because for the first time in months I saw an adult who was gentle. She spoke to me in a soft voice, didn't give me orders. She looked at me with warm eyes, not suspicion. And when she touched my shoulder, I didn't flinch. I felt warm, really warm. That evening, she told jokes at dinner and made Grandpa stay silent the whole meal. I don't remember the story, just that I laughed out loud. A real laugh. The first in so long. That night, as she set up her room, she turned to me and asked, "Miriam, if you'd like, would you sleep in here with me tonight?" I didn't answer right away. I just nodded. And for the first time since Mama passed, I slept through the night without dreaming of a door closing behind me. I didn't know why Aunt June came, but from the moment she walked into that house, I never felt entirely alone again. And deep inside, a small seed began to grow. The belief that maybe I was still worthy of being loved. Sometimes, you don't need someone who understands everything, just someone who genuinely wants to know. Aunt June stayed for a week. 7 days isn't long. But for me, it felt like 7 seasons blooming after a winter that wouldn't end. She tidied the kitchen as if it were her own, replaced the tablecloth, swapped the dried chrysanthemums for fresh sprigs of lavender. Small changes, but they made the air easier to breathe. She quietly reset the rhythm of the house, never loud, never forceful, just there. I began to spend more time with her, hanging clothes, shelling peas, listening to her stories about the city, about bookstores, about church bells that rang without haunting, about Sundays that didn't make anyone tremble. One afternoon, when the men were out in the field, she asked me to help pick basil in the garden. While I crouched low to the soil, her hands slowly removed her gloves. "Miriam," she said softly, "do you ever have dreams?" I froze. I looked up and met her gaze, no judgment, no pity, just a question from someone who truly cared. I wanted to nod, then I shook my head. I had never known I was allowed to answer a question like that. I asked because last night, you were breathing hard in your sleep, she said gently. She didn't say I was screaming, didn't say I was shaking. She didn't make me feel ashamed. I clutched the basil so tight the leaves crumpled in my hand. "Sometimes I dream of Mama," I whispered. "And what does she say in the dream?" I bit my lip. There was a long pause. Then I said quietly, "She's at the end of a hallway, calling me, but I can't reach her. Because he's standing in the way." The wind still. Birdsong stopped. She didn't say anything at first. She just stepped closer, knelt on the dirt in her clean dress, and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Miriam, do you know that what happened was not your fault?" That was the first sentence in my life that made me burst into tears, not from pain, but from relief. That afternoon, I cried for the first time since Mama died. Not from fear, not from hurt, but because someone had seen me, really seen me, and with just one sentence, she unlocked something I didn't know was still there. Hope. Silence used to be how I survived, but at some point, it became the very thing drowning me. That night, I thought I would sleep, but I couldn't. The house no longer echoed with footsteps. No more creaking cane tapping at midnight. Everything felt still in a strange, unfamiliar way, as if a part of my memory had been torn away and hidden. I turned in bed, clutching the blanket to my chest, eyes fixed on the sliver of light beneath the door dim. Flickering. It came from the living room, where Daddy hadn't turned off the lamp. I left my room. No slippers, no knocking. Just quiet feet across the wooden floor. Daddy sat in his old chair, holding a faded photograph. I guessed it was Mama. On the table, a cup of tea, untouched, the steam long gone. "Can't sleep?" he asked, without turning around. I didn't answer. I sat across from him, at the edge of the table, not too close. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice rough, as if each word was pulled from deep inside. "I'm sorry." Just 3 words, but they made the room tremble. I had never heard him say that. Not because he didn't know how, but because men of his time were never taught to say sorry to their children. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a failing father. I saw a man unraveling, finally letting someone witness his brokenness. I don't blame you," I whispered. "I should have known, should have seen, should have protected you. I know, but I only needed you to believe me." He nodded, still staring at the photo. "I believe you? I always have. I just didn't say it soon enough." I placed my hand on the table, a small hand, yet in that moment, it felt bigger than the fear that had once swallowed me whole. "I'm not leaving you alone again," he said, not looking at me, but his voice wrapped around me like a blanket. That night, the living room lamp stayed on until morning, not because anyone forgot to turn it off, but because 2 people, a father and his daughter, had chosen to stay and tell the truth. Some truths don't need to be spoken. When someone knows you well enough, a single look can shatter everything. Daddy came home early that day. I don't know why. Maybe it was a hunch. Maybe it was Aunt June. Or maybe it was something in him, the part that had buried his own sorrow so deep. He forgot how to look his daughter in the eye. He walked in while Aunt June and I were shelling peas in the kitchen. The air suddenly felt tighter. Quieter, only the soft pop of split pea pods filling the space. He set the grocery bag on the table, didn't say a word, just stood there for a long while, as if searching for the right place to begin a conversation no one wanted to have. "Joe at the market said Miriam hasn't been talking much lately," he said flatly. "Teen girls change a lot," Aunt June replied, her hands still busy with the peas. He didn't respond. He looked at me, and I knew he was starting to understand, not because anyone had told him, but because silence, when it stretches long enough, teaches people how to hear the unsaid. His gaze dropped to my hands, small, curled inward, as if holding something fragile and broken. Then he met my eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't look away. I looked back. In his eyes, I saw horror, realization, and something that looked a lot like guilt. He turned away almost immediately, said nothing more, picked up the bag and stepped outside. But I saw his shoulders tremble, not from cold. That night, he didn't eat dinner. Didn't light a cigarette like usual. The next morning, when I woke up, Aunt June said he'd left the house early. I don't know where he went. She told me. But I knew he needed someplace quiet enough to ask himself, why didn't I see it sooner? Sometimes, truth doesn't arrive in accusations. It shows up in a single glance, long enough, deep enough, that nothing can hide anymore. There are battles that don't need raised voices, just one person refusing to look away. That night, I sat by the window, the darkness soaked into the trees, the floorboards, even my thoughts slow, heavy, unannounced. I heard Daddy's truck pull in tires crunching over gravel. A door open, closed. Then silence. Then footsteps, unhurried, measured. Like each one had been decided long ago. I peeked through the curtain. He didn't come inside right away. He stood on the porch, the same place he always smoked after supper. But this time, there was no cigarette in his hand, just clenched fist. Then he stepped in straight through the kitchen, past Aunt June, and stopped in the doorway to the living room, where my father met my grandfather's eyes. The room went still. Aunt June sat in her knitting chair. I hid behind the wooden partition, heart pounding in my throat. Their eyes met two men from the same bloodline. 2 generations of silence. Daddy was the first to speak, his voice low, strained. "Do you have anything to say to me?" No rage, no accusations, but I had never heard him sound colder. Grandpa smirked that crooked, familiar smirk, the kind that always made my stomach twist. "What are you talking about?" "Ernest. Some little girl spinning up fairy tales and you believe her?" I held my breath. Daddy didn't answer. He just stepped forward, then stopped, and spoke again, each word firm, unshaking. "I don't need her to tell me." The space between them turned into a battlefield, no weapons, no shouting. Just the weight of truth pressing down like a storm that had waited too long. Grandpa stood. Tried to walk past. Daddy didn't touch him. He didn't have to. His gaze was enough. "You'll leave this house. Tonight." One sentence. No threats. No begging. But it struck harder than any fist. No more words were spoken. Only the sound of a door opening, then closing. This time, he left. Not me. That night, for the first time, I didn't lock my bedroom door, because I knew the one who needed to leave that door behind had finally walked out. Some nights don't need many words, just someone brave enough to stay. That night, I thought I'd sleep, but I didn't. The house no longer echoed with his footsteps. No more heavy cane tapping on old wood at midnight. Everything was silent, so silent it felt like a stranger had moved in and taken away all the noise. I turned over, pulled the blanket close, and stared at the faint glow under my door soft. Steady, it came from the living room. Daddy hadn't turned the light off. I got out of bed. No slippers. No knocking. Just bare feet and breath held tight. He was sitting in his old wooden chair, holding a photograph probably of Mama, on the table, a cup of tea. Untouched. No steam left. "Can't sleep?" he asked, not turning around. I didn't answer. Just sat across from him, keeping a respectful distance. After a while, he spoke, his voice low, like it had been sitting inside his chest for years. "I'm sorry." Only 3 words, but they made the lamp flicker. I had never heard him say that. Not because he didn't want to, but because men from his generation, they were never taught how to say sorry to their daughters. I looked at him, and this time, I didn't see someone who failed. I saw a man unraveling, letting someone finally see all the brokenness inside. I don't blame you," I said softly. "I should have known. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. I know, but I only needed you to believe me." He nodded slowly, still looking at the photo in his hand. "I believe you. I always have. I just didn't say it. Not when I should have." I placed my hand on the table between us. It was a small hand, but that night, it felt larger than every shadow that had followed me. "I won't let you be alone again," he whispered. He didn't look up, but I felt it, like a blanket placed gently across my shoulders. That night, the living room lamp stayed on until morning. Not because someone forgot to turn it off, but because 2 people, a father and his daughter, had chosen to stay and say nothing together. Some things are too heavy to say out loud, but they fit just right on a page. I started writing again on a Monday morning, just a few days after he left for good. The kitchen was quiet. Aunt June was rinsing vegetables. Daddy was mowing the lawn. Everything seemed to fall back into rhythm. But I knew I was no longer the same Miriam. I found the little notebook Mama gave me, the soft leather-bound one, pages yellowed at the edges. The first page still held my childish scrawl, Mimi's diary, no peeking allowed. I sat by the window. The early sun slid down my sleeve, warm like breath, and I began to write, not a diary, not exactly a letter, just the truth I could no longer carry inside. To him, if he even cared. I'm not writing this to make you feel guilty. I don't know if you're even capable of guilt. I'm writing because I don't want this silence to be the only story I leave behind. Maybe you think I'll forget. That time will bury everything under dust and days. But memories don't rot. They wait for someone to look them in the eye. I still get scared. Sometimes. But I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. I'm afraid of staying silent for so long that I stop hearing myself. You're not in this house anymore. And from this moment on, you're not living in my head anymore. Either. I closed the notebook. Didn't send the letter. Just tucked it into the bottom drawer of my old desk, the same place I used to hide unsent letters to Mama. And for the first time, I felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer belonged to just me. That evening, when Aunt June asked, "You okay?" "Miriam," I answered, "I will be," and for the first time, that answer didn't feel like a lie. I still didn't know how long it would take to be okay. But from that moment on, I knew this much. I was no longer just surviving. I was becoming, not a victim, but a woo. Some places used to make me feel small and invisible, but when I returned, I saw the light had been waiting there all along. The day I returned to school, the sun was soft, not too bright. Not gloomy, just warm enough to light everything, especially me. The old schoolhouse sat nestled between tired trees, its chipped paint, squeaky windows, and slanted porch all still there, like nothing had changed. But something had me. Back then, I used to think of school as a place of quiet shame. Now, I saw it as the place I once longed to be, just another girl. Not that girl. Just Miriam. I walked through the front gate, gripping the strap of my bag so tightly it left a red mark on my shoulder. Some of the other kids looked at me, whispered. A few giggled behind hands, but I didn't lower my head. I walked straight to the classroom. Miss Eleanor, our young teacher with the voice warm as fresh bread, looked up from her desk and smiled, nodded gently, like she already knew everything and still welcomed me in. "Welcome back, Miriam," she said. "You may sit wherever you like." I chose the seat by the window. The sunlight filtered in through the cracks, falling across my desk in golden slant. During handwriting class, when the others bent over their letters, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence carefully. Slowly. "My name is Miriam, and I'm still here." No one saw the tear fall onto the page. No one needed to. I didn't write for sympathy. I wrote because I had survived. That afternoon, I sat still in my chair, feeling the sun on my back, and for the first time, I didn't need Aunt June beside me to feel safe. I didn't need to hide. I just needed to be. I still didn't know the name of the girl I was becoming. But I knew this. She was brave. She could write. She could sit by the window and let the light touch her face without flinching. There were days once marked by fear, but once you survive them, you have the right to rename them. I no longer feared Sundays. No more waking up with a tight knot in my belly. No more watching the clock. No more sitting on the old rocking chair, waiting for darkness to pass just so I could breathe again. Now, Sundays meant waking up early to bake with Aunt June. They meant long walks to the post office with Daddy, just to buy stamps and watch the red dirt road stretch out in silence. One afternoon while rinsing rice, I turned to Aunt June and asked quietly, "Do you ever forget the past?" She didn't answer right away. She just placed her hand over mine, looked me in the eye with those weathered, storm-touched eyes, and said, "No, but I learned how to live so it doesn't decide who I am." Her answer stayed with me all afternoon. I sat on the porch, watching sunlight fall in patches across the old brick steps like memory. Still there, but not in the way anymore. I began doing small things for myself. I planted yellow daisies in a cracked clay pot by the window. I wrote 1 page a day. Not perfect words, but honest ones. I let myself smile even if healing wasn't done yet. One Sunday evening, I sat again in that old rocking chair, the same one that used to know all my pain. But this time, I didn't tell it anything. I just rocked in silence. Not the kind born from fear, but the kind that comes when you've finally learned how to be still inside yourself. I renamed my Sundays. They were no longer the day darkness came. They were now the daylight gently arrived. Not loudly, but just enough to remind me I was still here. I was still breathing, and I was learning to love myself. Some people don't show up to rescue you. They just stay long enough until you remember how to rescue yourself. I met Caleb in early spring, one of those days where the earth was still damp from winter, but the light had already begun to soften. He was the new boy in class, taller than most, quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel heavy, just present. He had gentle eyes, and a way of sitting that made the chair seem less like furniture and more like a space to belong. I had no intention of making friends. I had grown used to being alone in hallways, in lunch line, and inside my own mind. But Caleb wasn't like the others. He didn't ask questions. He didn't force conversation. He just showed up. One afternoon in the library, I was flipping through pages I wasn't reading. He sat beside me and slid a mint across the table. No words. No reason. I took it. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invaded. I felt light. After that, we walked home together sometimes. Not always talking. Just walking. His presence didn't demand anything from me, only allowed. One cloudy afternoon, I found myself whispering something I hadn't meant to share. I've been hurt. Badly. He didn't ask. By who? He didn't say, tell me everything. He didn't try to fix him. He just said, I know. And I'm still here. Those 4 words were more than comfort. They were a door I hadn't dared knock on. A door that said, you don't have to be unbroken to be worth staying for. I didn't know if it was love. Probably not the storybook kind. But it was the first time I believed that maybe someone could care for all of me, even the parts I thought I had to hide. The first person I had to forgive wasn't him. It was me. I was 19 when I got accepted into a small teaching college just outside town. It was the kind of place with big shade trees, a library that smelled of paper and silence, and students who still believed they could make a difference. But more than a school, it was the place where I started learning how to love myself again. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in small, quiet ones. I woke up early, boiled water for tea, and brushed my hair not to look pretty, but to learn how to see myself without flinching. I read books without skipping pages that reminded me of pain. I wrote not about what happened, but about who I wanted to be now. There were still bad days when shadows clung like damp clothes, but I didn't hide from them. I sat with them. I let them speak. And when they were done, I reminded myself, you're still here. And that means something. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. It's just the quiet decision to try again in the morning. I wasn't healed, but I was healing. And in between all that wasn't yet whole, I found someone I could live with. Me. Sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever write is a letter to the child you used to be. One quiet evening, I returned to my old desk. The same desk where I used to scribble poetry that never rhymed and secrets I never sent. This time, I opened a fresh page. Not to confess, not to explain, just to speak gently to the girl who still lives somewhere inside me. Dear little Miriam, you were so brave. Not because you never cried, but because you kept going even when your heart begged you to stop. I know how tired you were, how scared, how small you felt in a world that didn't make room for your voice. But guess what? You made it. You became a woman who wakes up early and bakes on Sundays. You became someone who writes again, who no longer flinches at her own story. You're not perfect. You're still healing. But you've learned how to carry yourself with kindness. You don't need to prove your worth. You never did. I see you now, and I'm proud of you. Love, Miriam. From the future. I folded the letter, didn't seal it, didn't hide it. I placed it in my notebook and left it open on the desk like a light left on for someone who might still need it. That night, I slept peacefully. Not because everything was fixed, but because a part of me had finally been heard. By me. Sometimes, the person you were waiting for to rescue you is the one you grow up to become.